It's been a little while since we last caught up with our next guest. Of course, a former Maryland men's soccer star and went on to play for the U.S. national team, and now he is an outstanding analyst on ESPN. Got a lot to talk about with him. He is Taylor Twellman, and he's back with us now here on GCR. Taylor, it's Glenn and Paul in Baltimore. It's great to catch up with you, man. Thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes for us.
No problem. How you guys doing?
We're all right. Certainly better than we were about 4 years ago around this time.
Yeah.
I remember our show that morning, and I was reminded of your reaction live on air on that particular night. I know that I don't think anybody feels like overwhelmingly great about where the U.S. men's program is, but obviously it's in a far better place than it was 4 years ago at this point.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can qualify for a World Cup. Listen, everyone in this conversation that happens about where you finish in qualifying, no one really remembers. You qualify for the World Cup or you don't.
Right.
Portugal has needed 3 playoffs in the last 4 World Cups to get in, and they've got one of the greatest players of all time in Ronaldo. So it happens. You just got to get in. And that's what made the debacle of 2017 so great and so big, because there was no excuses that you can't qualify in CONCACAF. And while it was a little anticlimactic last night, losing 2-0 in a place that the United States still have never won a World Cup qualifier for the men, you're still in. You still qualified, which was the task at hand. And while there are a few bumps in the road, fact is, in about 220 some odd days, the United States is going to be back in where they belong, and that's playing in the World Cup.
Where are we with the fact that the U.S. struggles to score on the road? I mean, is it just an anomaly, Taylor, or is there something to it that I know they're not going to be true road games in the World Cup, right? Like, it doesn't work that way, but we can't shake how weird it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's obviously something there, whether it's a mental block or whatnot, who knows, because this is a generation that doesn't have any real scars, right? You know, other than Christian Pulisic, Kellen Acosta, DeAndre Yedlin, and then you throw in Paul Arriola. Those are the only 4 that were on the roster last night that were part of 2017, and only one of those is part of the younger generation. And so I don't know. I think the number 9 position is still a major question mark. I said it almost 2 years ago. Took a lot of criticism on Twitter, and I'll sit here and tell you, am I wrong? The answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the number 9 position is a major, major talking point for Greg Berhalter, because scoring goals is a problem when you have a real diverse collection of wingers now and attacking players to supplement that. That's going to be a concern for Greg over the next 200 days.
All right, let me get one on you because we got one Maryland guy that we're dealing with. It's Zach Steffen. I know it wasn't a great night for him last night. It's nice to have good goalies, right? Like, it's nice that it's not just one guy, and the U.S. has multiple good goalies. Should Zach Steffen be the incumbent? Should he be the favorite to be the starter in Qatar?
No.
Okay.
No. And I was on the record coming into this camp that Ethan Horvath should have been the starter because he was playing. Listen, for the American sport listener that isn't really used to soccer and conversation, let me compare it to you this way.
Okay.
Your goalkeeper is your quarterback in the sense that you have to have games. You have to be in form. You have to be consistently playing, especially for the United States. And look at last night's game against Costa Rica. Keylor Navas is the only reason why Costa Rica is in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the amount of saves. And when you go really dive into the weeds and look at the expected goals differential, he has literally saved 11 goals against for Costa Rica. That's on the analytics. That's the nerds telling us what that is. So Keylor Navas single-handedly can win you games. Tim Howard, Casey Keller, Brad Friedel, Tony Miola. I can go up and down the list for the last 20-some-odd years. The United States have had that. Zach Steffen isn't a foregone conclusion. He's the number 1. He looks rusty. He looks unsure of himself. Matt Turner's now making the move to Arsenal. If he's not playing regularly, what does Ethan Horvath do? Where's Sean Johnson? Goalkeeper's number 2 biggest issue going into the World Cup, because you want to make sure you've got players playing and confident. And right now, for the first time in a long time going into a major tournament, the United States, as of today, that may change, does not have a starting goalkeeper.
Boy, I understand what you're saying, and I get it entirely. It's just tough for us to hear because we're Maryland. You know how it is, Taylor. We want to root for a Terp to be involved. It's just the
but put
nature
it
of
this
the.
way: if Stefan starts playing 15 games or so consistently for Manchester City, or if
Sure.
he says for some weird reason he wants to go on loan
Yep.
before the tournament, then I'm all in.
Right.
I've seen Zach Steffen for the Columbus Crew playing consistently win you games. I just haven't seen that in a long time because he's not playing regularly.
That's a very fair point. It's an extraordinarily fair point. All right, he's Taylor Twellman. He's with us here on Glenn Clark Radio. Taylor, a big part of the reason we wanted to chat with you this morning is we've seen how vocal you are. We've been talking with Sasho for years about what we're now calling the 21st century model and his proposed schedule change for college soccer, and it's drastic, and it's kind of shocking. The idea of literally pausing a season and then restarting it, and it's the same season. We just don't see that occur in American sports. Why, to you, is this the best thing moving forward for the concept of college soccer?
Because the NCAA has literally looked at this, guys, at soccer, and it hasn't changed since 1960. It is more barbaric than any treatment of athletes, both men and women. Every other sport, and I can give you examples, and you can. The proof is in the pudding. Have changed for the better of the sport and development of the student athlete. Soccer has not. It's completely irresponsible from the governing body. They know it. The athletic directors know it, and thankfully, Sasho's got this hair up his behind to change things. And it's been taken almost 10 years. It's completely irresponsible from the NCAA. And yet, when you look at it, it's not changing anything other than they're taking a pause. They're spreading out the 134 days. They're allowing the student athletes, which, by the way, as of today, they play Thursday, Saturdays, Wednesday, Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if you get a concussion? So the welfare of the student athlete is completely compromised. The development of the student athlete is completely compromised because you're asking he or she to play 20, 24 games in 2.5 months. That's ridiculous. And more so, it kills the competition. You're not getting the best. Sasho and coaches cannot coach. They cannot develop. It's about survival. There's no thriving within the system. And when you look at the nuts and bolts of it, it's not more money. It's nothing other than you're changing the landscape for soccer to thrive. If they don't do this, mark my words, you're going to be calling me in 5 years, and especially on the men's side, it may be obsolete. It may be a club sport.
Right.
Because the problem is you are not going to get any 12-year-old right now that is going to do that because there are going to be better options where school is still involved to become the highest level soccer player you can be, and the NCAA doesn't understand that the infrastructure is completely there to be a huge viable option to develop American soccer players in this country. And I have a bad feeling in large part because the women and their coaches haven't looked at it and assessed it and actually joined I hope it goes because it works. It will work, more importantly, I should say. And secondly, it just makes common sense. But then again, we're talking about a governing body that maybe common sense is a little too far from that.
That's not unfair. That is not even remotely unfair. Taylor, let me follow up on a couple. First of all, for those who don't know, the vote is coming up on April 13th about the 21st century model. You referenced in there, by the way, I mean, we already see this at the high school level, right? Like how many high-level kids don't play high school soccer because they're playing club soccer, right? So why wouldn't you just keep doing that? And if I could follow up, and please forgive my ignorance, right? And what I don't know about this, Taylor. A couple years ago when COVID hit, there was a question about moving college football to the spring. And I said then, you can't do that. You won't have your players. They're going to depart because they've got to get ready for what they're going to do next. They can't participate in the spring. So you won't have Trevor Lawrence and you won't have all of the guys that you'd want to tune in to watch because they got to get ready to go pro. Is there an impact on how this involves, like, a kid like Ben Bender a year ago who was the number 1 pick in the Super Draft? Is there an impact on this for the kids as far as their ability to transition?
Nope, there's not.
Okay.
I mean, first off, you can't change football, not soccer. You can't change college football because it's ingrained in the culture, right? So it's a fall sport ending with the bowl games right after the New Year or
Right.
before the New Year. So you can't change that because mainly it's in the culture. You're not going to change the culture of the sport. Soccer is meant around the world. Now, MLS is different, and there's a lot of call for MLS changing their schedule because you do not want the biggest games that you are playing up against the NFL. Around the world, the most important games, the bigger games, are right around April, and they go all the way through the Memorial Day. University of North Carolina during COVID actually did this because of COVID, and they actually have tangible evidence of the cost, what it did to everything. It was less than what it was in the fall. So to your point, you don't lose anything. The players are there. Secondly, the players that want to still get their college education, that still want to play for a school and play for a student body, you're going to get them because of the main reason is now the coaches are allowed to develop. The coaches are allowed to develop human beings, professionals. The student athletes can thrive. I can't ask any student athlete that's played college soccer. It's insane.
Yeah.
Because for 2.5 months you play your season, but what do you do for the other 7 months? Spring season? Like, it makes no sense.
I understand. By the way, I've been calling soccer at Loyola for the last 8 years, and we've talked about this a ton over there. And I get that at certain institutions there's pushback just because it feels like, well, hey, we've already got resources in the spring. This makes things more difficult on us. But I think your point. The other thing that we have to acknowledge is part of it. It's kind of insane to be playing a game in Philadelphia for a national championship in December when it's 5 degrees outside. It's miserable. Like, is that nobody wants to come and watch the product?
No, exactly.
Because it's an insane time for you to be playing for your national championship.
Look at what the national championship is for lacrosse.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Boston. I've been to it many a times. I mean, you're looking at 30,000 in Gillette Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you this. If your college cup is in Memorial Day or the weekend before, whenever they're planning this to do with the 21st century model, soccer-specific stadium, any of the MLS stadiums, it's sold out. It's just it is what it is. But we're forgetting the most important part here. We are asking 17 to 22-year-olds to play 20-some-odd games in 2 months.
Right.
That is asinine. That is completely against how sports should be played, especially a sport when at the highest level you're playing a game at minimum every 4 days. Champions League, they're not doing this. So this is where the NCAA loses me on this. Because if your best player gets a concussion on Thursday and he or she need to play Sunday, you think that's properly being assessed?
I understand,
get
right.
out of here. So
Right.
it's honestly, it's mind-boggling to me.
I understand what you're saying, Taylor, and look, I think it's culture shock, and I think that's part of it. You know how this is, and we don't like change in this country. We're just used to doing things a certain way, and whenever you suggest something that's different, everybody comes back and says, no. Well, why? Well, because this is what we're used to.
Right, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And I would argue that the NCAA knows exactly what they're getting into, and they know that the right answer is to expand this. But when you have changed every other sport in the last 40 years for the betterment of the sport and for the betterment of the student athlete, but you looked at men's soccer and women's soccer and said, we don't need that, lose me with that excuse.
I completely hear you. All right, Taylor, one more for you. This will be a successful – this trip to Qatar will be successful if the U.S. can do what? And I know we don't know the draw yet, and so if they get put in a group of death, it could be problematic. But how do we define success in 2022 for the U.S.
The draw is massive, though. We can't remiss the draw, right? So, like, if you see a draw that's in your favor, well, then you say win the group and move on and see where you go out of that. So success always for the United States men is getting out of the group, no matter how you slice it, because the draw is a huge impact. The draw is not an impact for Brazil, France, Germany, because they're favored to win, so they don't care about their draw. Everyone else, including the Englands of the world, you look at your draw. You have to. And so even Argentina is going to look at it and say, wait a minute, I don't want to be in that draw. So that's why this is different. Ask me Friday afternoon when I know the draw.
Okay.
But for me, it's always been the round of 16 because the draw then determines who you're playing in the next round. And everyone points to 2002 saying, well, look at that success of the team. Everyone forgets they played Mexico in the round of 16.
Right.
The one known quantity. round of 16 is a given. That's how you determine success. And then everything else, honestly, is whipped cream on the cake because you look at it and say, yeah, well, what was the draw? Do you play Belgium and Tim Howard has to make 6,000 saves? Or do you play Mexico where you know who they are, and you're like, you know what, we're expected to win.
It's tough. I still treat Chris Wondolowski's name as a curse word, and that's unfair because he was a hell of a player. But I'll never forget that opportunity that he had. I'll never.
Tim Howard makes 18 saves or whatever the World Cup record is, and it comes down to one chance.
Oh God!
And if he scores that, this is the salt on the wound. They play Messi on July 4th in the World Cup quarterfinals.
Oh, God,
that would have done 40 million viewers in this country.
The reminder is painful. I literally just got a chill, Taylor.
That was 8 years ago, by the way.
Oh, God. Hey, Taylor, I want to give you an opportunity to talk up Think Taylor and Twellman Soccer and whatever else we can plug for you that you've got going on. You do so many wonderful things.
Oh, no problem, dude. Think Taylor's just I'm changing the message around the social impact regarding TBIs in sports, and just thinktaylor.org and support the cause, and anything you guys can do would be great.
I appreciate that. You can find it on Twitter at thinktaylor.org to find out more. Taylor Twellman, really appreciate you taking a couple minutes for us this morning. Interesting to see how this plays out with the NCAA. I understand your skepticism, but really enjoy the conversation as always. And it's incredible to see you continue to kill it, man. You're so good at what it is that you do, brother. Appreciate you spending a couple minutes with us.
Go Terps, my man. Go Terps.
Thanks, dude.